Hi folks. In some of my recent videos I've been doing some work with sand cores, which create cavities inside sand molds such that the liquid bronze will flow around the sand core and it won't deteriorate. And one of the methods I've been experimenting with is using a material called sodium silicate, and I talked about that, as I say, in some of my previous videos. Sodium silicate, it's a clear liquid, or kind of a viscous liquid depending on the concentration. And somebody asked me, well, is it expensive? Where do you get it? Where can I find it? And in different places. It's used in pottery for a couple of different things. It's used, as I just said, in making sand cores, for metal casting, bronze casting. But where to get it? Well, you can obviously order just about everything online. One place I had originally gone and had some was for a slightly different purpose though, was as what they call rigidizer, which is this is about a quart, cost me about $70 Canadian, and it's kind of low concentration sodium silicate, so it's a little more watery than the stuff I was hoping for, and I'd use this to coat some of the ceramic wool in my forge just to toughen it and make it a little more rigid, just the name, or thus the name rigidizer. But that's kind of expensive, $70 for a quart, and it doesn't go super far depending on what you're doing with it. And I looked online and I eventually found a slightly more concentrated version. This is, how much is this? This is a pint, thicker, higher concentration. That cost me about $35 Canadian. And even at that, it's just a very straightforward chemical. And I thought there must be a place to get it cheaper. And so I looked online, and of course there are a number of people who have faced the same challenge, and there is, if you're up to it, a fairly straightforward recipe for making the stuff yourself. And all you really need, and you might laugh about this, is cat litter, and not the clay kind, not the bentonite clay kind, but the newer stuff that's made of silicate gel. And in fact, this stuff was already crushed up, so greater surface area, so it's going to dissolve better. If you're wondering about the blue color, this particular brand has chemicals added to some of the crystals that change color when it gets wet, so you know when to change your cat's litter, something like that. Anyways, from what I've seen, that additive, whatever that blue color changing chemical is, doesn't affect the sodium silicate we're going to produce at all. The other component that we need is sodium hydroxide, which is typically a drain cleaner, or can be found in drain cleaner. It's also called lye. Sodium hydroxide is also called lye. And lye's been around forever. It's an old chemical. It's nothing new. What you would want to do, though, if you're going to try this yourself, although I don't recommend trying this yourself because it's terribly dangerous, etc., is to look for one that specifically says on the label 100% sodium hydroxide, because there are other drain cleaners that have other chemicals added in for good reason, I'm sure. But for this purpose, that's not what you want. What you want is something that is clearly marked as 100% sodium hydroxide or 100% lye. And the ratios that we need here in terms of ingredients, if you think of like a recipe, are 300 grams of the cat litter, and I'm gonna just measure that out right now. Zero my scale, that's all good. So I'm just going to add here, and I want 300 grams of cat litter. That should be just about this whole container actually, but let's see. $260, $270, $280, $290. 300, there we go. So that's what 300 grams of silica gel cat litter looks like. That's what we'll add to our recipe, or that's one of the main ingredients in our recipe. And then the sodium hydroxide, zero my scale again, you need, if I can get it open, there it is, 200 grams of sodium hydroxide. And I'm not quite sure what that looks like in terms of volume. $200, there we go. And I think you can probably see on the camera there, it's just sodium hydroxide, just a clear white powder, very caustic though. Don't get it into your eyes, your mouth, or anything like that. You should probably use gloves if you're handling it, because it does react with moisture, even just in the air and that kind of thing. Quick comment, I talked about the prices of the other stock sodium silicates I found online. A bag of this cat litter, just at the hardware store, that kind of thing, That was about $20 Canadian, and a tub or a little jar of sodium hydroxide, that's about $5. So as you can tell, way cheaper to start with, and volume-wise, I'm getting a ton more out of it. So way more than is in either of these. So there we go. So there's 200 grams of sodium hydroxide, or lye. And what we're going to do is we're going to bake it, not bake it really, but stir it all up in, to start anyways, 500 milliliters, so a half liter of water. I'm just going to measure this out here. There we go, that's about 500 milliliters. If you're wondering about the jug here, this is sort of the what happens when you collect scrap tin from all over the place to make bronze. You have lovely shop tools like this lying around. Right, so we've got our three main ingredients: our water, our cat litter, and our lye. What we're going to do is we're going to put the water to start in this cast iron pan. Sorry, not cast iron, I apologize. Stainless steel pan, of course. Don't use cast iron. The lye will react with it and that sort of thing. What you want is a stainless steel pan or pot, as it may be. And we're going to start adding the lye. Now I'm going to put a fire brick under this because this whole reaction is very exothermic. It's a fancy term, means just produces a lot of heat. So the first step here is we're going to add the lye to the water and stir it in. What did I do with my stainless steel spoon? Here we are, and we'll see what happens. And add it slowly, don't add it all at once, because it will start to froth and heat up, just like it would in your drain, of course, so to burn out whatever clog you're trying to fight. So, do some of that. Let me just feel the side of the pan. It's a little bit warm already, actually. So we'll add a little more. What you're trying to do is get rid of all these crystals on the bottom. Just going to look at my spoon. It was labeled as stainless, but I did get it at like a dollar store, so buyer beware, perhaps. There we go. No, it looks okay though. No reaction going on there. Same with the pan, from what I can see. Put a little more in there. Keep stirring. Oh yeah, and the side of the pan is getting warm now, so the lye is doing its job. Just for the record, like I said earlier, sodium hydroxide, very caustic, so I've got safety goggles on just in case there's a little bit of a splash or anything like that. I'll get that bug out of there. Somehow a little bug got in my pot. There we go. Sorry, guys. Just keep stirring and working it so that the crystals don't collect on the bottom of the pan, pump up or anything like that. Or and I can feel the heat now, not through the pan, but just above it. It's producing quite a bit of heat. At some point, the water will probably, eager to see, maybe start to boil even. Even more heat. This should be the last, yeah, this is the last little bit of lye. There we are. And looking in, there are no crystals on the bottom that I can see. It's all dissolved into the water. I've seen some people online say you should use distilled water. I didn't have any distilled water lying around, but I did filter the water through a, like a water filter for like house use. And I've seen other people say that that's more than sufficient. Distilled water would be the ideal, but it's not totally necessary depending on how perfect you want it to be. So now what you do is you begin adding some of the cat litter. And again, a little bit at a time. Let's see how this reacts. Ooh, now there's some sizzling going on. You can probably see it there too, some of the bubbles. So what's actually happening, and what I'll do is I'll insert, if you're interested, the chemical formula or the reaction formula. There's a proper stoichiometric formula, something like that, for what's going on chemically in the pot right now, as the sodium and the sodium hydroxide and the silica gel react with each other. And what should happen is that the crystals, the cat litter crystals, just dissolve into the liquid. And they do seem to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller, which is good. I know that some of the cat litter, the silica gel cat litter you can buy, comes in with fairly large chunks. And if that's all you can get, that apparently is fine. What you might want to do is break it down in a shop blender, if you have one, or just with a hammer, into smaller and smaller chunks, because the smaller the pieces are, the faster they will dissolve. But these are getting smaller and smaller and smaller as I stir. And what we're actually going to do in a little bit is we're going to go outside to the barbecue for a little bit of heat underneath the pot to help the reaction along, because heat will help. It's starting, well, it's still warm, but it's cooling some now. I guess the sodium hydroxide has stopped its reaction for the most part, or at least exothermic reaction. Add some more there. A little bit of bubbling. Keep stirring. And ultimately what we want to have again is just a clear, transparent liquid. And if I've done that right, that's what we'll have, although a little bit blue. Or maybe a different color, depending on what color, that blue color. And what we're ultimately going to have is just a transparent liquid again. Blue or red or whatever color it's supposed to turn when it gets wet, but we'll see what that is. But all the crystals, given these proportions of ingredients, should dissolve into this solution. I'm going to keep adding, well, let's see, I'll add a little more here. Keep going until it doesn't want to dissolve any further, and then we'll take it out to the barbecue. This is reminding me that the holiday season isn't that far away, and I'll have to start making a bunch of fudge for friends and family for Christmas. All right, you know what? I think that's enough for inside. I'm going to take this out to the barbecue, and I'll see you out there. All right, back in the shop now, obviously. Nice day to be barbecuing, I guess, in the neighborhood here in Toronto. Bright and sunny, a little cool, but bright and sunny. So lovely blue color. It kept the blue color of those crystals. And you saw me in the video scooping out all the excess crystals. I think what little I remember from high school chemistry was, the solution basically was fully saturated with the crystals. So I don't know that it could possibly take more unless I really superheated it, which I did not want to do. So the next step, and I think I showed you in the video, or as best I could, that films were forming on the surface of the solution here. And that's because the water glass, the sodium silicate now, is reacting just with the carbon dioxide in the air. And again, that's why we use it to create sand cores, is because you can infuse or expose it to carbon dioxide and it becomes like more sand, except it's binding the actual sand all together. Or like glass, perhaps, is a better way to put it. So, of course, you can't just leave this exposed to the air, or the whole thing will just eventually turn into a solid mass of sodium silicate, I guess, even after exposure to CO2. But, so what you need to do is put it in an airtight container for storage. And I've got this container ready. I think this ought to be, what was in this container is meant to be kept dry. So I'm assuming this lid, this container, will be sufficiently airtight to protect the sodium silicate so it doesn't just all harden. My only concern is the heat might melt the plastic, but we'll see what happens here. Is there a useful way to test that? Probably not. Here we go. Let's pour this in and see what happens. Well, the container's quite a bit bigger than I needed it to be, but there will only be so much air trapped in here once the lid's on, so hopefully... put it on tight, like I said. And there I go. There's some dirt cheap, well, maybe not as cheap as dirt, but much cheaper sodium silicate ready for use in sand cores versus what I paid online for either the rigidizer version or the pottery version by... I don't know, maybe a third, less than a third the cost. And I'll use this, my new homemade DIY sodium silicate, in a future video where I'm making some more sand cores. Stay tuned to find out how that works. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.